So we've now got our template string formed up into our URL. As a reminder, the template string is really just here to save us having to do all the typing of string concatenation together with a bunch of pluses. And it's a feature given to us by ES6 or ES 2015, depending on what you want to call it. So we've got our URL. All we need to do now is make our actual request. So to do so, fortunately, it's dead simple. We're just going to call fetch and pass it our URL. Now you'll notice that we didn't include any module in here called fetch or anything like that. And as a matter of fact, I've said many times that our code is 100% sandboxed and we don't get access to a whole bunch of code in between modules without first requiring it. Well, fetch is definitely one of the exceptions from that. When we use fetch, we don't need to require any modules. We can just call fetch and poof, we got it. Fetch takes a single URL and returns a promise. Now to work with this promise, we'll chain on a method call of then, and we'll pass it our function, which will be called with a response object. So fetch is going to run off to the internet, make the request for us, communicate with the server. It's going to come back and then call this function right here and pass it the response that we got back from the server. Now, unfortunately, there's one really nasty thing about fetch, something that's really annoying, and I'm definitely not a big fan of it. The response that we get back here is not actually immediately usable. It doesn't actually have the data on it that we want to get access to. Before we can make use of it, we have to recall response.json. And this JSON method right here, this is going to produce the actual JSON data that we got back from the server. So this is going to give us back the data that we actually call about. Unfortunately, it's not even that simple. There's another little bit of a twist in here. Not only do we have to call JSON, but JSON doesn't actually return an object that we can work with. It returns a promise. So to get access to the actual JSON inside of the response, we have to return the product of JSON, which is another promise, and add on another then. Now this second function here, this is going to have the data that we actually care about. This is going to have the JSON that we want. So we've got our JSON object that we really care about here, and from this we want to return an object with all the properties about the weather that we really care about here. And for our application, we really care about 3. We want to get the city, the temperature, and the description. And if you recall, we saw all these properties over in the documentation right here. So we've got a really good idea of what the response object looks like. We can probably just access the properties and we'll be good to go. First off is the name. So we should be able to call just json.name and we'll get the name of the city. Remember, the city that we're getting back here is the city that is closest to the longitude and latitude that we made the request for. So the API is fortunately doing just a little bit of magic for us in locating the nearest city. It's really handy. Next, we need to get our temperature, and our temperature is going to be json.main.temp. And there's a reminder that comes in as Kelvin, so we're going to need to convert it really quick. So we'll say JSON main temp. And then we're going to have to write our conversion function, which should be really easy. We're just going to call it, we'll call it, how about Kelvin to F? Simple enough. So up here we'll say var Kelvin to F. It will take in a Kelvin and it will just return a value in Fahrenheit. And I'm just going to do this totally off the top of my head. No, I'm kidding. I have this formula written down. So math.round Kelvin minus 273.15 times 1.8 plus 32. So this will take Kelvin value and convert it to Fahrenheit. If you want your application to instead use Celsius, if that's the temperature scale that you're used to, no problem. Just remove the times 1.8 plus 32. Kelvin minus 273.15, that is a Celsius value. So you should be good to go. Next, we'll add on a little string here to just signify that it is a temperature. I'm going to do the degree symbol. On OS X, you can get the degree symbol by pressing Option K, and you see it just gives us the little degree symbol there. And then I'll do F. So some number of degrees, F, Fahrenheit. Cool. So we've got our Kelvin. Let's not forget our commas. And the last thing we need is our description. Our description is going to be pretty straightforward, just JSON. Let's reference it really quick. JSON.weather, that's an array. So the first element out of it, we want the description. So we have JSON.weather. The first element, we get our description. Description. Cool. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. I'm going to save this, and I've got pretty good level of confidence, right? This is going to do what we want. We're going to make our request. Fetch returns a promise. The first then receives a function with a response. The response is not immediately usable, so we need to call JSON on it. JSON itself returns another promise. So to get access to the value of the JSON, we need to chain on another then. This second then will get a function that retrieves the actual JSON that we care about. This is a pattern that you're going to see all over the place with React Native. This kind of fetch with a URL and then a then with the JSON. If you're going to be working on your own application, I highly recommend that you just add a little helper in your code. Really, you don't really want to be calling fetch and then adding on this promise here every time. It'd be nice if you just called fetch as JSON, and then fetch as JSON might just call this block of code for you, and then all you ever have to do is add on your then and get access to your JSON. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and in the next section, we're going to continue on. You might notice that we are making our API call here, but our index ios.js component is not actually making use of the API just yet. So the next section, we're going to focus on hooking up the two files together.